Proposed Constitution of Iran. The Path to Enduring Freedom. First Draft. This material represents the first draft of a foundational framework envisioned to guide the future government of Iran. This audiobook has been generated using text-to-speech technology. As such, some words or names may be mispronounced. We appreciate your understanding and hope you find this a valuable resource.
The Constitution of Iran. Preamble. Heritage and Vision. The enduring essence of the Iranian people is profoundly shaped by a rich historical and philosophical heritage dating back to ancient pre-Islamic Iran. This heritage, exemplified by the Achaemenid Empire's governance and the foundational principles of Zoroastrianism, reveals a deep-seated emphasis on individual freedom and autonomy, intrinsically balanced by a strong commitment to personal responsibility. The Achaemenid Empire established governing principles that bore functional resemblances to individual liberty and concepts of natural rights, particularly when contrasted with the absolutist and homogenizing tendencies of other ancient empires. This was manifested through the Achaemenid Empire's widespread cultural and religious toleration. As seen in Cyrus the Great's policy of allowing displaced peoples to return to their homelands, restoring local temples and religious institutions, and refraining from forced conversions or the imposition of religion. Across the empire, local populations were permitted to maintain their own laws, languages, customs, and educational systems. This approach underscored a profound value for harmony through pluralism, treating individuals not merely as subjects of an empire, but as members of distinct communities with protected customs and traditions. Philosophically, this respect for individual agency highlights free will as a fundamental aspect of human existence, where individuals possess the freedom to choose between truth, righteousness, and order, versus falsehood, deceit, and chaos through their thought, word, and deed. This choice is central to individual spiritual and personal development and a profound assertion of individual autonomy. This intrinsic freedom is inextricably linked to personal responsibility, with placing a heavy emphasis on moral accountability, asserting that individuals are judged based on their actions, with good deeds leading to spiritual advancement and a favorable life. The Iranian mantra of good thoughts, words, and deeds serves as a practical guide for self-advancement, encouraging individuals to actively cultivate ethical conducts, including responsibility for the environment's well-being, promotion of education, and community service, thereby contributing to the world's renewal. However, the Islamic conquest of Iran in the 7th century and subsequent invasions by Mongols, Turks, and others profoundly degraded Iranian culture and negatively affected its identity by marginalizing Iran's ancient practices, texts, and institutions. These invasions destroyed cultural and intellectual centers, eroding the Iranian ancient traditions, while Persian culture adapted through integration, producing vibrant art and literature. The loss of values like free will and cosmic balance, alongside reduced political autonomy and the suppression of ancient rituals, led to a dilution of Iran's heritage. Today, more than ever, we Iranians recognize that a return to the essence of our ancient cultural heritage serves not only our nation, but the broader interests of humanity. By reaffirming our national identity, cultivating governance grounded in free will, personal responsibility, and ethical principles, advancing stewardship of the natural habitat, revitalizing economic life, and enriching the global community through our cultural inheritance, we aspire to contribute meaningfully to the ethical and ecological discourse of our time and to the enduring cause of peace among nations. Covenant of Unity. Now, in the spirit of returning to our advanced cultural essence, we, the people of Iran, being duly cognizant of, and in solemn affirmation of these foundational principles of our heritage, and of the inherent and inalienable rights of life, individuality, liberty, and individual property, which are divinely bestowed upon all persons and precede all forms of human legislation, and recognizing the common national patrimony in Iran's natural resources, hereby ordain, and establish this sacred covenant among ourselves and with the body politic constituted under the provisions of this Constitution. It is hereby affirmed that life embodies the inherent right of every individual to existence and the preservation of their being. That individuality embodies the quintessential essence of each person, thereby granting each person the intrinsic right to conduct their life in accordance with their own needs, preferences, and inherent abilities. Furthermore, it is affirmed that liberty empowers the unfettered exercise of one's faculties, and that individual property constitutes the tangible fruits derived from the application of those selfsame faculties to the elements of nature. We further affirm that the natural resources situated within Iran's borders constitute a common national patrimony, collectively owned by all citizens, from which direct benefits are derived. We declare these interconnected rights to be fundamental to the preservation of human dignity, a concept foreshadowed by the emphasis on moral autonomy. Moreover, it is hereby affirmed that individual rights are inextricably linked with individual responsibilities, thereby imposing upon each person the correlative duty to respect the rights of others. This commitment to personal responsibility echoes the principle of moral accountability. This Constitution is hereby solemnly ordained as a binding covenant, established for the express purposes of securing these aforementioned rights, upholding individual responsibilities, ensuring the administration of justice as seen in our ancient traditions, promoting the common good, and safeguarding the sovereignty and prosperity of the Iranian populace and the integral territory of Iran for both current and future generations. Article 1. Bill of Fundamental Inalienable Rights. Section 1. Right to life. Every individual, without distinction, possesses the inherent right to life and the preservation of their existence. The law shall, by all means necessary and appropriate, safeguard this fundamental right for all persons against any form of harm or aggression. Section 2. Right to liberty. All individuals, without restriction based on race, religion, gender, ethnicity, or any other characteristic, are vested with the right to exercise their faculties freely, thereby enabling them to conduct their lives in accordance with their needs, preferences, and abilities, provided that such exercise is conducted with due respect for the correlative rights of others. This general right to liberty shall include, but not be limited to, the following enumerated rights and freedoms. Right to thoughts and speech. The right to thoughts and speech is a fundamental aspect of an individual's existence, stemming from the core concept of free will. Individuals are entitled to freely form, hold, and express their thoughts, beliefs, and ideas. This freedom of thought, word, and deed is central to individual spiritual and personal development and a profound assertion of individual autonomy. Freedom of action. Every individual has the right to engage in any lawful action that does not infringe upon the rights of others or violate public order, as defined by law. Freedom of association. Individuals are entitled to associate freely with others for any lawful purpose, including social, cultural, political, or economic activities, without interference, provided such associations do not harm others or disrupt public safety. Right to voluntary transactions. Every individual has the right to participate in voluntary economic, commercial, or personal transactions, including contracts, trade, and exchange of goods or services, free from undue restriction, as long as such transactions comply with applicable laws and do not harm others. Right to marriage. Any adult has the right to marry any other consenting adult, provided the marriage is entered into freely and with mutual consent, in accordance with the law. Protection of personal autonomy. All individuals have the right to make decisions regarding their personal life, lifestyle, and relationships, free from coercion, provided such decisions do not violate the rights of others or legal standards. Right to defense. Individuals are vested with the inherent and inalienable right to defend their own life, liberty, and property. This right is fundamental to the preservation of human dignity and stems from the unfettered exercise of one's faculties, which liberty empowers. Furthermore, in recognition of the principle that individual rights are inextricably linked with individual responsibilities, thereby imposing upon each person the correlative duty to respect the rights of others. This right to defense extends to the protection of the life, liberty, and property of other citizens facing aggression, fraud, or plunder. To ensure this inherent right to defense, individuals shall have the right to keep and bear arms, and to employ any means necessary to repel aggression, fraud, or plunder against their own life, liberty, or property, or that of other citizens. Right to bodily integrity and freedom from cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. Every individual has the inherent and inalienable right to bodily integrity, affirming their physical and mental inviolability. No person shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Such acts constitute a grave violation of the inherent rights to life, liberty, and human dignity, and shall be absolutely prohibited under all circumstances. The government, its agents, and any individual acting under its authority or color of law are strictly forbidden from engaging in, authorizing, condoning, or failing to prevent such acts. This prohibition extends unequivocally to all individuals within Iran's jurisdiction and applies irrespective of their citizenship status, alleged offense, or any other circumstance. Any statement, confession, or evidence obtained through torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment shall be inadmissible in any legal proceeding. Furthermore, any law, policy, or action purporting to sanction or permit such treatment shall be deemed null and void. Mechanisms for redress when rights are violated, including judicial review, shall be readily available for victims of such treatment. Moreover, excessive bail and excessive fines are considered cruel and unusual punishments are expressly prohibited. Right to an effective remedy. Every individual, by virtue of their inherent natural rights to life, liberty, and property, shall possess an inalienable right to an effective remedy for acts violating the rights and freedoms guaranteed by this Constitution or established by law. The government, in fulfilling its purpose to protect these inherent natural rights and ensure justice, shall provide and maintain mechanisms for redress when rights are violated, including but not limited to judicial review, ensuring fair and impartial determination of rights and liabilities. Any person whose rights, as defined herein, have been violated, shall have the right to seek and obtain appropriate legal recourse, including the invalidation of any law or action deemed null and void for infringing upon such rights, and the provision of equitable relief or compensation as determined by a competent tribunal. This right to an effective remedy shall be equally accessible to all citizens, without discrimination, and shall uphold the principle that no citizen shall be deprived of their rights without due process of law. The judiciary shall exercise its power to resolve disputes and ensure the protection of natural rights, serving as the primary guarantor of this fundamental right to remedy. Protection against arbitrary interference with privacy, family, home, or correspondence. Every individual, by virtue of their inherent natural right to liberty and individuality, possesses an inalienable right to privacy, encompassing the sanctity of their person, the integrity of their family life, the inviolability of their home, and the confidentiality of their correspondence and communications. This right is fundamental to the free exercise of one's faculties and the preservation of human dignity. No person shall be subjected to arbitrary or unlawful interference with their privacy, their family, their home, or their correspondence, nor to unlawful attacks on their honor and reputation. The government, its agents, and any individual or entity acting under its authority or color of law are strictly prohibited from engaging in, authorizing, or condoning such interference. Any interference with these rights must be expressly authorized by law, be demonstrably necessary and proportionate for the protection of the inherent natural rights and freedoms of others, or for the compelling interests of justice and public order, and shall be conducted only with due process of law. General warrants, blanket authorizations for surveillance, or arbitrary searches and seizures shall be deemed null and void. This protection extends unequivocally to all citizens. Any law or action found to violate these guaranteed rights shall be null and void. Freedom of religion and freedom from religion. Individuals are entitled to practice or abstain from religion as they may choose. For minors and individuals with developmental disabilities, parents or guardians may guide their religious upbringing, with oversight from the law to ensure the freedom of minors and individuals with developmental disabilities from coercion in matters of religion. Notwithstanding the foregoing, the tenets or practices of any religion shall not abrogate or permit the violation of any inherent natural right, freedom, or protection enumerated or guaranteed by this Constitution. This is because individual rights are inextricably linked with individual responsibilities, thereby imposing upon each person the correlative duty to respect the rights of others. Any religious tenet or practice that leads to or sanctions the infringement upon the life, liberty, or property of any individual or any other constitutionally protected right shall be deemed null and void and shall not be afforded constitutional protection. Freedom of movement. Every individual possesses the inherent right to move freely throughout the territory of Iran and to choose and establish their residence in any of its provinces. This right is a fundamental aspect of individuality and liberty, stemming from the unfettered exercise of one's faculties and the ability to conduct their lives in accordance with their needs, preferences, and abilities. While provincial governments are vested with powers to establish their own governance structures and local taxation, they shall not impose arbitrary restrictions, discriminatory conditions, or undue burdens that infringe upon this fundamental right of free movement and residency for any citizen. Any law or action, whether enacted by the federal government or a provincial government, that violates this freedom of movement shall be deemed null and void from inception. The government is tasked with protecting the inherent natural rights of all citizens, and all branches, including provincial governments, are bound to uphold the natural rights of life, liberty, and property for all citizens, without discrimination. This protection ensures that citizens, whether acquiring citizenship by naturalization or by birth, may equally enjoy their inherent natural rights across all regions of Iran. Section 3. Right to property and common national patrimony. Right to private property. Every individual is vested with the right to own and exercise control over the tangible fruits of their labor, their person, and any property acquired through lawful means that are derived from individual faculties applied to nature. This right encompasses the acquisition, use, enjoyment, and disposition of such property, provided that such exercise is conducted with due respect for the correlative rights of others. Right to common national patrimony of natural resources. All natural resources situated within the territorial boundaries of Iran, including, but not limited to, minerals, petroleum, natural gas, and water, are recognized as the inherent and inalienable common national patrimony of every citizen. This collective ownership is literal in nature, entitling each citizen to direct benefits derived from these resources. The government shall establish and maintain mechanisms to ensure the transparent and equitable distribution of benefits derived from these commonly held resources, thereby ensuring that every citizen's inherent stake is duly respected. This includes the accurate estimation and efficient collection of usage fees from private entities that extract or utilize these resources, and the direct disbursement of these fees to all citizens as their equitable share. This framework is designed to recognize and uphold the collective ownership of natural resources and to prevent their monopolization. Section 4. Rights of Children and Vulnerable Citizens. Definition and Fundamental Protections. The term vulnerable citizens collectively refers to minors and individuals with developmental, mental, or cognitive disabilities or deficiencies. These individuals are specifically identified within this Constitution as being potentially unable to protect their own interests. This Constitution mandates specific protections for vulnerable citizens to ensure their safety, well-being, and inherent dignity, and to prevent any form of harm, exploitation, coercion, or abuse. All citizens, including vulnerable citizens, are equally entitled to their inherent natural rights and shall not be deprived of them without due process of law. Role and authority of guardians. Guardians refer to individuals, including parents or caregivers, who are legally empowered or duly appointed to act on behalf of vulnerable citizens. The fundamental rights of vulnerable citizens, including the right to life, liberty, and property, are safeguarded by duly appointed guardians who may act on their behalf, or by the law itself. Any actions undertaken by guardians on behalf of vulnerable citizens must be for the purpose of ensuring their safety and well-being without prejudice to their inherent dignity. Specific applications of rights for vulnerable citizens through guardians. The general role of guardians is to safeguard the fundamental rights of vulnerable citizens, including their inherent right to life, liberty, and property, by acting on their behalf. Guardians are permitted to guide or impose reasonable and proportionate limitations on this freedom solely for the purpose of ensuring safety and fostering responsibility, with the law empowered to prevent any coercion or abuse. Crucially, any actions undertaken by guardians must be for the purpose of ensuring the vulnerable citizen's safety and well-being without prejudice to their inherent dignity. Right of vulnerable citizens to common national patrimony of natural resources. For minors, the proceeds from their proportion of the common national patrimony of natural resources, including their basic minimum income share, shall, except in cases of demonstrable hardship as determined by law, remain in escrow until the minor reaches adulthood and shall not be directly disbursed to their guardians. For other individuals with developmental, mental, or cognitive disabilities or deficiencies, direct disbursements of usage fees from the common national patrimony of natural resources, which constitute each citizen's equitable share and a basic minimum income, shall be managed by duly appointed guardians, subject to judicial oversight to prevent misuse. In all cases of vulnerable citizens, including minors through their funds in escrow, guardians may access these proceeds only upon a judicial determination of demonstrable hardship for the express purpose of managing essential expenses for the vulnerable citizen. This framework is designed to ensure equitable prosperity and prevent monopolization. Governmental oversight and safeguards. The government, in the execution of its duty to protect the rights of minors and other vulnerable citizens, shall ensure that guardianship mechanisms duly respect their inherent rights, including their share of natural resource disbursements, limiting interference solely to that which is necessary for their safety and the prevention of harm to others. Such protective measures undertaken for vulnerable citizens, particularly concerning their privacy, family life, home, correspondence, or natural resource disbursements, are consistently subject to judicial oversight to ensure they are necessary, proportionate, and respectful of the individual's inherent rights and dignity. The judiciary shall be empowered to interpret laws, resolve disputes, and ensure the protection of natural rights for all citizens, including adults, minors, and individuals with mental disabilities. The government shall not detain, punish, or deprive any citizen of their rights without due process of law, ensuring equal protection for all citizens as defined herein, including minors and other vulnerable citizens. The prohibition against torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment extends unequivocally to all individuals within Iran's jurisdiction, including vulnerable groups, and any statement or evidence obtained through such treatment shall be inadmissible. The right to an effective remedy for violations of rights shall be equally accessible to all citizens, including adults and vulnerable citizens, without discrimination. Section 5. Protection of animal welfare. The intrinsic value of animals, both wild and domesticated, and their right to be free from cruelty, neglect, and inhumane treatment is recognized. The government shall have the power to enact and enforce laws ensuring the humane treatment, care, and protection of animals, including the establishment of standards for their welfare, the preservation of their natural habitats, and the prevention of practices that cause unnecessary suffering. No person or entity shall engage in acts of cruelty, abuse, or exploitation of animals, whether wild or domesticated, as defined by law. The right to own, raise, or utilize animals for lawful purposes, including agriculture, research, or companionship, shall not be abridged, provided such activities adhere to humane standards established by law. The federal and provincial governments shall cooperate to protect endangered species and preserve ecosystems critical to the survival of wild animals. Congress may regulate interstate and international commerce involving animals or animal products to prevent harm to animal populations and ensure ethical treatment, including the enforcement of humane slaughter practices in the production of animal-derived goods. This article shall not be construed to impair the rights of individuals to engage in lawful hunting, fishing, or other traditional practices, provided such activities comply with regulations designed to prevent cruelty and ensure sustainable populations. This enforcement shall respect the balance between human needs and animal welfare. Article 2. Citizenship. Section 1. Citizenship by naturalization. Any person born outside the territorial jurisdiction of Iran who has satisfied the legal requirements for naturalization, as duly established by the government of Iran, shall be recognized as a citizen of Iran and shall be entitled to all rights and responsibilities conferred by this Constitution. Section 2. Citizenship by birth. Any person born within the territorial boundaries of Iran shall be recognized as a citizen of Iran, provided that prior to such person attaining the legal age of adulthood, at least one of their parents becomes or is a citizen of Iran. Such a person shall be entitled to all rights and responsibilities conferred by this Constitution. Section 3. Equal rights and duties. All citizens, whether acquiring citizenship by naturalization or by birth, shall be entitled to enjoy the inherent natural rights of life, liberty, and individual property, inclusive of an equal share in Iran's common national patrimony of natural resources, as such rights are defined and enumerated in this Constitution. Article 3. Government conduct and limits of power. Section 1. Purpose and scope of government. Purpose of government. The government of Iran, established by this Constitution as a binding contract between the Iranian citizens and the nation, exists for the purpose of protecting the inherent natural rights of life, liberty, and individual property of all citizens, and for stewarding the common national patrimony of Iran's natural resources for the benefit of all citizens, as defined herein. The authority of said government is derived exclusively from the consent of the governed and shall be strictly limited to the securing of these aforementioned rights. Protection of rights. The government shall be empowered to enact and enforce laws for the express purpose of preventing aggression, fraud, or plunder against the life, liberty, or property of any individual, whether such individual be an adult, a minor, or a person afflicted with mental disabilities. It shall further be incumbent upon the government to organize collective defense and ensure the administration of justice in a manner consistent with the rights and responsibilities of citizens. Stewardship of natural resources. The government shall act in the capacity of a fiduciary trustee of the collective financial value of Iran's common national patrimony of natural resources, ensuring equitable access to or benefits derived from these resources for all citizens, as shall be prescribed by law. The government's role shall specifically involve overseeing the accurate estimation, efficient collection of usage fees from private entities that extract or utilize these commonly owned resources, and managing the transparent and equitable direct disbursement of these fees to all citizens as their inherent share. This framework is designed to prevent the misuse or monopolization of these commonly owned resources and shall at all times respect the equal ownership rights of every citizen to these resources. National defense. The federal government shall be responsible for maintaining a military apparatus to protect the nation from external threats, as authorized by this Constitution. Foreign affairs. The federal government shall be responsible for conducting diplomacy, negotiating treaties, and managing international trade policies, including tariffs. Interprovincial commerce. The federal government shall be responsible for maintaining an environment for promoting free trade between the various provinces. International commerce. The federal government shall be responsible for regulating commerce with foreign nations, including establishing tariffs and managing ports. Currency and coinage. The federal government shall be responsible for issuing and regulating money, as granted by this Constitution. Taxation and revenue. The federal and the provincial governments shall be responsible for collection of taxes and generation of revenue, as granted by this Constitution. Judiciary and law enforcement. The federal government has the authority to maintain a federal court system to resolve disputes involving federal law, interprovincial issues, or foreign parties, enforcing laws related to counterfeiting, piracy, and other federal crimes. Establishment of weights, measures, and standards. The federal government has the authority to regulate weights, measures, and standards, establish uniformity in weights, measures, and standards to facilitate commerce, trade, and taxation across the country. Key responsibilities include standardizing weights and measures. The federal government is tasked with creating uniform standards for weights and measures to ensure consistency in the territory of Iran and for international trade. Coinage and currency standards. The federal government is responsible to standardize the value of one unit of currency, as backed by a certain portion of each commodity in a basket of commodities, the formulation and proportion of which may be adjusted periodically by Congress. Tariffs and duties standards. The federal government is tasked with standardizing measures for assessing tariffs and duties on imported goods. Standards for elections and voting. The federal government is responsible for developing standards for the management of elections and voting by citizens pertaining to electing the electable members of the federal government. Such standards ensure an honest, equitable, and transparent election of governmental officers across the nation. Standards for emerging technologies. The federal government is tasked with developing technical standards for emerging technologies. Food and drug safety and nutritional standards. The federal and provincial governments are tasked with ensuring food and drug safety and compiling nutritional and health standards. Professional certificate standards. The federal and provincial governments are responsible for developing standards required for professional trade certification and the training and educational requirements for those certifications. Water management. The federal government is responsible for the management of major water projects to allocate water for agriculture. Municipalities and industry, regulation of water quality and access to protect public health and ecosystems, and mediation of interprovincial water disputes and enforces equitable allocation. National census. The government shall conduct a comprehensive national census every 5 years, enumerating the whole number of persons within the nation, including citizens and residents, for the purposes of apportioning representation in the legislative bodies, allocating public resources, and informing national policy. This census shall be carried out with accuracy and impartiality, and the results shall be made publicly available, subject to laws protecting individual privacy. Section 2. Restrictions on government enterprises and revenue. Prohibition on government ownership of businesses. The government of Iran is expressly prohibited from owning, operating, or engaging in any commercial enterprises. This restriction applies to various sectors, including but not limited to manufacturing, mining, drilling, media, or service-oriented ventures. The government shall not directly engage in the extraction, processing, or sale of natural resources, as these commercial activities are reserved exclusively for private citizens or entities. This approach is consistent with the inherent right to individual property and the liberty to pursue economic endeavors. However, while commercial operations are for private entities, the natural resources themselves remain the common national patrimony of all citizens. The government's role concerning these resources is a fundamental fiduciary duty and a mechanism for safeguarding collective property rights. This means the government is mandated to accurately estimate the value of these resources, efficiently collect usage fees from private entities that extract or utilize them, and equitably and directly disperse these fees to all citizens as their inherent share. Limitation on revenue generation. The government shall generate revenue solely through taxation, as shall be prescribed by this Constitution, and is hereby expressly prohibited for the government to derive income from commercial activities or other analogous means. Taxation shall be implemented with transparency, applied equitably, and strictly limited to the minimum amount necessary to fulfill the government's constitutional duties. Section 3. Method of taxation. Retail sales tax. The sole and exclusive method of taxation shall be a tax on finished merchandise and rendered services, to be levied at a percentage determined by law on transactions occurring between businesses and individuals. Transactions conducted between businesses or between individuals shall be exempt from such taxation. Purpose and effect. This prescribed method of taxation is designed to foster savings and investment by enabling individuals to minimize their tax burden through prudent expenditure. Furthermore, it is intended to ensure fiscal restraint, inasmuch as increases in the retail sales tax rate may result in a reduction of business activity and governmental revenue, thereby aligning governmental spending with prevailing economic realities. Section 4. Monetary creation and issuance. Commodity-backed currency. The government shall possess the sole and exclusive authority to mint currency, which said currency shall be backed by a specific and defined basket of commodities, with each unit of currency representing an exact amount of those commodities as shall be defined by law. The composition of the commodity basket shall be reviewed every 5 years, transparent and subject to legislative approval. Prohibition on pegging against foreign currency. The currency of Iran shall not be pegged to the currency of any other sovereign nation, thereby ensuring that its value remains independent and tied solely to the designated commodities and preserving economic sovereignty and stability. Section 5. Direct disbursement of proceeds from natural resources. Equal ownership of natural resources. All natural resources situated within the territorial borders of Iran, including but not limited to minerals, petroleum, natural gas, and water, are recognized as the inherent and inalienable common national patrimony of every citizen, whether adult, minor, or any other vulnerable citizen. This collective ownership is literal in nature, entitling each citizen to direct benefits derived from these resources. Separation of resource value. The intrinsic value of natural resources within any property shall be distinctly separated from the value created by human endeavor. Private entities who utilize natural resources shall remit a usage fee, as shall be prescribed by law, reflecting the resource's inherent value, which said fee shall be disbursed periodically and directly to all citizens as their equitable share. Administration and technology. The government shall establish transparent mechanisms, leveraging modern technology, to accurately estimate or calculate, efficiently collect, and equitably distribute these usage fees, thereby ensuring that each citizen receives a basic minimum income derived from their share of natural resources. For vulnerable citizens, the management of these disbursements, whether directly to guardians for non-minor vulnerable citizens or via escrow accounts for minors as defined herein, shall be overseen by duly appointed guardians, subject to judicial oversight to prevent misuse. Purpose and effect. This framework is designed to ensure equitable prosperity, recognize the collective ownership of Iran's common national patrimony of natural resources, and prevent the monopolization thereof by individuals or entities, thereby upholding the natural right to individual property while promoting the happiness and economic security of all citizens. Section 6. Limits on government power. Prohibition on violation of rights. The government shall not infringe upon the natural rights of life, liberty, or individual property as enumerated under the Bill of Rights in this Constitution, nor shall it infringe upon the common national patrimony of natural resources or the equal share of citizens in the benefits derived therefrom. Any law or action enacted or undertaken by the government that violates these rights shall be deemed null and void from inception. Restricted scope of authority. The government shall not exercise powers beyond those expressly delegated to it by this Constitution. It is hereby prohibited from engaging in legal plunder, unjustly redistributing property, or imposing coercive measures that suppress individual faculties or responsibilities. Safeguards for vulnerable citizens. In the execution of its duty to protect the rights of minors and other vulnerable citizens, the government shall ensure that guardianship mechanisms duly respect the inherent rights of those citizens, including their share of natural resource disbursements, limiting interference solely to that which is necessary for their safety, and the prevention of harm to others. Such measures shall at all times be subject to judicial oversight. Safeguards for environmental ecosystem and animal welfare. The government, in fulfilling its constitutional duties, shall be mandated to safeguard environmental ecosystems and ensure the welfare of animals, both wild and domesticated. This includes recognizing the intrinsic value of animals and their right to be free from cruelty, neglect, and inhumane treatment. The federal and provincial governments are tasked with enacting and enforcing laws to ensure the humane treatment, care, and protection of animals, including the establishment of standards for their welfare, the preservation of their natural habitats, and the prevention of practices that cause unnecessary suffering. Furthermore, the federal and provincial governments shall cooperate to protect endangered species and preserve ecosystems critical to the survival of wild animals. Transparency and accountability. The government shall conduct its operations with utmost transparency, particularly in the management of natural resources, public funds, currency minting, and resource disbursement. It shall be fully accountable to the citizens, with established mechanisms for redress when rights are violated, including but not limited to judicial review and changing of electoral processes. Separation of powers. To prevent the undue concentration of authority, the government shall be divided into distinct legislative, executive, and judicial branches, each endowed with specific functions and subject to checks upon the others, as shall be prescribed by this Constitution, thereby ensuring that no single branch usurps the rights of citizens. Prohibition on arbitrary power. The government shall not detain, punish, or deprive any citizen of their rights without due process of law, thereby ensuring equal protection for all citizens as defined herein, including minors and other vulnerable citizens. Prohibition on titles of nobility. Granting of any title of nobility by the government, whether federal or provincial, is strictly prohibited and will not be acknowledged. Article 4. Religious freedom and separation. Section 1. Prohibition of government-established religion and interference in religion. The government, including its federal and provincial entities, shall neither establish, promote, nor favor any religion, nor shall it interfere with the free exercise of religion, except where such exercise violates established law or public safety. Section 2. Restriction on public resources for religious purposes. No public funds, resources, or institutions shall be used to support religious activities, instruction, or displays, nor shall religious beliefs be a condition for any public office, employment, or benefit. Section 3. Protection of private religious expression. This article shall not be construed to prohibit private individuals or groups from freely practicing or expressing their religious beliefs, provided such actions do not infringe upon the rights of others or disrupt public order. Section 4. Congressional Enforcement Authority. Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Article 5. Structure of Government. Section 1. Division of Powers. Separation of powers. The government of Iran shall be perpetually divided into 3 distinct branches, namely, the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, each possessing specific powers and responsibilities for the express purpose of securing the natural rights of life, liberty, and individual property, including the citizens' equal share in Iran's common national patrimony of natural resources. No branch shall exercise the functions appertaining to another, thereby ensuring a system of checks and balances designed to prevent the concentration of authority. Federal structure. The government shall operate as a federal republic, with governmental powers apportioned between the federal government and each of the governments of Iran's 31 provinces. The federal government shall exercise only those powers expressly delegated to it by this Constitution, while provinces shall retain all other powers not expressly prohibited to them, thereby fostering local governance and accountability. Section 2. Legislative Branch. Composition. The legislative power of the government shall be vested in a dualistic National Assembly, consisting of a Senate and a House of Representatives. Senate. The Senate shall be composed of 2 senators from each of Iran's 31 provinces, who shall be elected by the populace of their respective province for terms of 6 years, which term may be renewed but once. To ensure continuity, 1/3 of the Senate seats shall be subject to election every 2 years. House of Representatives. The House of Representatives shall consist of representatives apportioned among the provinces based upon their respective populations, who shall be elected by the populace of their respective districts for terms of 2 years, which term may be renewed but 3 times. The total number of representatives and their apportionment shall be determined by law, based upon a national census to be conducted every 5 years. Power and responsibility. The National Assembly shall possess the power to enact laws for the protection of natural rights, regulate the retail sales tax, define the commodity basket for the national currency, establish mechanisms for the direct disbursement of natural resources, and perform such other functions as are expressly delegated by this Constitution. All legislation shall require the approval of both chambers, save as otherwise provided herein. Checks and balances. The legislative authority of the National Assembly shall be subject to the executive's power of veto, which may be overridden by a 2/3 majority vote in both chambers. In addition, the judiciary shall possess the authority to review laws for their constitutionality. The Senate shall confirm executive appointments and treaties. The House of Representatives shall exclusively initiate all revenue bills, including those pertaining to the retail sales tax and natural resource disbursement fees. Section 3. Executive Branch. Composition. The executive power of the government shall be vested in a President of Iran, who shall be elected by the populace for a term of 4 years, which term may be renewed but 3 times. The President shall be assisted by a Vice President, who shall be elected concurrently, and by such other officials as may be appointed by the President with the advice and consent of the Senate. The President may elect a different Vice President for each of the terms renewed, if any. Power and responsibility. The President shall be responsible for enforcing laws, serving as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, negotiating treaties, appointing major public officials, and ensuring the equitable administration of natural resource disbursements and issuance of currency. The President shall possess the power to veto legislation, subject to legislative override as herein provided. Checks and balances. The actions of the President shall be subject to legislative oversight, including impeachment by the House of Representatives and trial by the Senate for violations of this Constitution. The judiciary shall possess the authority to review executive actions for their constitutionality. The presidential term limits are established to prevent the prolonged consolidation of power. Section 4. Judicial Branch. Composition. The judicial power of the government shall be vested in a Supreme Court and such inferior courts as the National Assembly may from time to time establish. Justices of the Supreme Court, 9 in total, shall be appointed by the President with the advice and consent of the Senate, and shall serve during good behavior to ensure their independence. Power and responsibility. The judiciary shall be empowered to review and interpret laws, executive actions, and provincial regulations for compliance with this Constitution and resolve disputes. Checks and balances. The judiciary shall serve as a check upon the legislative and executive branches by declaring unconstitutional acts to be null and void. Justices are appointed by the executive branch and confirmed by the Senate, thereby ensuring accountability, while their tenure during good behavior protects their impartiality. Section 5. Provincial Governments. Power and responsibility. Each of Iran's 31 provinces shall possess its own government, vested with all powers not delegated to the federal government nor expressly prohibited by this Constitution. Provincial governments shall protect the natural rights of their residents, consistent with national laws, and may establish local taxation and governance structures within constitutional limits, provided that any such taxation adheres to the sole and exclusive method of taxation, the same as what is prescribed for the federal government by this Constitution. Checks and balances. Provincial laws and actions shall be subject to national judicial review to ensure compliance with this Constitution. The federal government may intervene to protect citizens' rights if a province fails in its constitutional duties. Provinces shall participate in national governance through their representation in the Senate and through local elections. No provincial government shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation. Coin money. Pass any legislative act that singles out a specific person or group for punishment without a judicial trial. Pass laws that criminalizes an act that was legal when committed or increases the punishment after the fact, or enact laws impairing the obligation of contracts, or grant any title of nobility. Section 6. Checks and balances across branches of government. Mutual oversight. Each branch of the government shall exercise oversight upon the others to prevent abuses of power. The legislature shall enact laws, the executive shall enforce them, and the judiciary shall interpret them, with each branch being accountable to the others and to the citizens through elections, impeachment proceedings, and judicial review. Protection of rights. All branches of the government shall uphold the natural rights of life, liberty, and individual property, and shall safeguard the common national patrimony of natural resources, including the equal right of citizens to benefits derived from them, ensuring that no citizen, whether naturalized, born in Iran, adult, minor, or person with mental disabilities, is deprived of their rights without due process of law. Impeachment and removal. The House of Representatives may initiate impeachment proceedings, and the Senate may conduct trial and effect removal from office of the President, Vice President, justices, or other public officials for violations of this Constitution. A two-thirds vote of the Senate shall be required for removal from office, thereby ensuring accountability to the people. Section 7. Judicial review of enacted laws. The judiciary shall possess the authority to review laws enacted by the National Assembly for their constitutionality. Upon a challenge to the constitutionality of an enacted law by any aggrieved party, or as otherwise provided by law, the Supreme Court, or such inferior courts as the National Assembly may establish, shall be empowered to hear and decide such cases. If a court, in the exercise of its judicial power, finds an enacted law, or any portion thereof, to be in violation of this Constitution, it shall declare such law or portion thereof to be null and void. Such a declaration shall render the unconstitutional act without legal force or effect from the date of the judicial declaration, as determined by the court. The Supreme Court shall retain final authority over all disputes arising from such constitutional reviews. Mechanisms for redress when rights are violated, including judicial review, shall be readily available for all citizens. Section 8. Official governmental spoken and written language. The spoken and written language employed by the federal and provincial governments shall be the language spoken and written by the majority of the citizens of Iran, as determined by the periodic compilation of the census. All official documents, proceedings, and communications of the government, including those of the Congress, the executive, and the judiciary, shall be conducted and published in this language. This article shall not be construed to prohibit the use of other languages for non-official purposes, including but not limited to education, cultural preservation, or communication with citizens who require accommodations due to limited proficiency in of the language adopted by the government. Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. This section shall take effect 2 years after the date of ratification to allow for necessary preparations and transitions. Article 6. Uniform National Voting Process. Section 1. Right to vote. All citizens of Iran, who are 18 years of age or older and of sound mind, shall have the right to vote in federal elections for the President, Vice President, Senators, and Representatives in Congress. This right shall not be denied or abridged by the federal or provincial governments on account of race, color, sex, age, or any other characteristic protected by law. Section 2. National Election Day. A single national election day shall be established, to be held on a uniform date across all provinces, as designated by Congress, for the purpose of electing the President, Vice President, Senators, and Representatives. Provincial governments shall administer and manage the election process, including voter registration, ballot access, and polling operations in accordance with federal standards ensuring accessibility, fairness, and security. Section 3. Federal Oversight. The Congress shall have the power to establish uniform standards for the conduct of federal elections, including provisions for voter identification, ballot integrity, and equitable access to polling places. The federal government shall oversee provincial compliance with these standards to ensure free, fair, and transparent elections, with authority to intervene in cases of noncompliance or voter suppression. Section 4. Direct popular vote for President and Vice President. The President and Vice President shall be elected by a direct popular vote of all eligible citizens. Each citizen of sound mind, aged 18 or older, shall cast one vote for a presidential and vice presidential ticket. The ticket receiving the highest number of votes nationwide shall be declared the winner, provided it constitutes a majority. In the absence of a majority, Congress shall prescribe a method for resolving the election, ensuring the will of the people is reflected. Section 5. Direct vote for senators and representatives. Each citizen of sound mind, aged 18 or older and residing in a province, shall have one vote for the election of senators and representatives in Congress from their respective province or district. The candidate receiving the highest number of votes in their respective election shall be declared the winner. Article 7. Process for constitutional amendments. The Congress, whenever 3/4 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, which shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several provinces.
This concludes the audiobook about the proposed Constitution of Iran. We hope you found this audiobook beneficial. Please provide your comments below.